December 23, 2015. 2 days before Christmas. A 911 call comes in from a quiet neighborhood in Ellington, Connecticut. A man's voice, breathless and panicked, tells the dispatcher that his wife has been shot by a masked intruder who broke into their home. But this isn't your typical home invasion story. This is the story of how a simple fitness tracker became the star witness in a murder trial. How 1,217 steps recorded on a Fitbit would expose one of the most calculated acts of betrayal in modern criminal history. Richard Dabate thought he had planned the perfect crime. He was a computer technician, he understood technology. But there was one piece of technology he underestimated, and that miscalculation would cost him his freedom for the rest of his life. This is the story of Connie Dabate, a mother who loved staying active, wore her Fitbit religiously, and never knew that her commitment to fitness would one day speak for her from beyond the grave. Welcome to a case where love, lies, and technology collided in the most unexpected way. To understand what happened on that cold December morning, we need to go back to the beginning. Connie and Richard Dabate had been married for nearly 10 years. From the outside, they seemed to have everything: a beautiful home in an upscale Connecticut neighborhood, 2 young sons, and what appeared to be a loving partnership. Connie, 39 years old, worked as a pharmaceutical sales representative. She was known throughout her community for her warm personality and infectious smile. Friends described her as someone who lit up every room she entered. She was health conscious, always trying to stay in shape, which is why she wore her Fitbit Charge HR religiously, tracking her steps, monitoring her heart rate, celebrating when she hit her daily goals. Richard, 40, worked as a computer technician for a local company. He was the tech-savvy one in the relationship, comfortable with computers, familiar with digital systems, and knowledgeable about how electronic devices worked. This expertise would later become crucial to understanding just how calculated his actions really were. Their friend Allie Clark later told reporters that they were a really solid couple, like a really together couple that had made it work. She said she never saw what was coming, describing them as a pair who really did seem to have it all. But as investigators would later discover, this picture-perfect marriage was built on a foundation of lies. Richard had been living a double life for over a year, maintaining the facade of a devoted husband while secretly planning a future with someone else entirely. The cracks in their marriage weren't visible to friends and neighbors, but they were there. Connie had begun to notice changes in Richard's behavior, working late more often, unexplained charges on credit cards, and a general distance that hadn't been there before. What Connie didn't know was that her husband had been having an affair with a woman named Sarah Ganser for more than a year. Sarah worked at the same company as Richard, and what had started as workplace friendship had evolved into something much more serious. The relationship had progressed far beyond casual encounters. Richard had been telling Sarah that his marriage was over, that he was planning to leave Connie, and that they would be together soon. He painted himself as a man trapped in an unhappy marriage, just waiting for the right moment to break free. But there was more to the story. Sarah was pregnant with Richard's child, due in just a few months. This pregnancy added urgency to Richard's situation. He could no longer keep his double life hidden indefinitely. Soon, there would be a baby, physical proof of his betrayal that couldn't be concealed or explained away. Text messages recovered from Richard's phone would later reveal the depth of his relationship with Sarah. The day before Connie's murder, he had sent Sarah a message calling her "my little love nugget" and promising to see her the next day. These weren't the words of someone planning to end an affair, they were the words of someone planning a future. But ending his marriage through divorce would come with significant financial consequences. Connecticut's divorce laws would likely result in Richard losing half of his assets, paying substantial alimony, and facing child support obligations for his 2 sons. For someone planning to start a new family, this financial burden would be overwhelming. However, there was another option. The Dabates had a substantial life insurance policy on Connie worth $475,000. If something happened to his wife, Richard would receive this money tax-free, providing him with the financial freedom to start over with Sarah and their unborn child. The pieces were all in place for what prosecutors would later argue was a carefully calculated plan. The morning of December 23, 2015, started like any other day in the Dabate household. Richard and Connie got their two sons ready for school and drove them to the bus stop together. According to Richard's later testimony, this was a normal part of their morning routine. After dropping the children off, the couple returned home. Richard claimed he was planning to go to work but was waiting for a home security system installer who was supposed to arrive that morning. He told his employer he would be late because of this appointment. At some point that morning, Richard said he left the house to head to work but realized he had forgotten his work shirt. He claimed he returned home around 10 a.m. to retrieve it, and that's when he encountered the intruder. According to Richard's story, as he entered the house, he was confronted by a tall man dressed in black wearing a mask. The intruder allegedly forced Richard downstairs to the basement at gunpoint, where they found Connie doing laundry. Richard claimed that during a struggle, the intruder shot Connie and then zip-tied his hands before fleeing through a basement window. Richard said he managed to free himself and immediately called 911. The 911 call came in at 10:12 a.m. Richard's voice on the recording sounded panicked and distressed as he reported that his wife had been shot by an intruder who had since fled the scene. When police and paramedics arrived, they found exactly what Richard had described. Connie was deceased from a gunshot wound in the basement. Richard had visible injuries, scratches on his chest and arms that appeared consistent with a struggle. The basement window was open, providing what seemed like an obvious escape route for the alleged intruder. At first glance, Richard's story seemed plausible. Home invasions, while rare, do happen. The physical evidence seemed to support his account. Richard himself was injured, suggesting he had indeed struggled with an attacker. But experienced investigators know that first impressions can be deceiving. Detective Kyle Buckley of the Connecticut State Police was assigned to lead the investigation, and he approached the case with the methodical thoroughness that would eventually uncover the truth. As Detective Buckley began investigating the scene, several details started to raise questions about Richard's account of events. The first red flag was the timing. Richard claimed he had left for work around 9 a.m. and returned home just after 10 a.m. because he forgot his work shirt. But when investigators checked his work computer systems, they discovered that Richard had remotely logged into his work computer from home at 9:46 a.m. This meant he was still at home nearly an hour after he claimed to have left. The second issue was the alleged escape route. Richard claimed the intruder had fled through the basement window, but when investigators examined the area beneath the window, they found no footprints in the snow despite a fresh snowfall the night before. Any person climbing out of this window should have left some trace in the snow below. The third concern was the lack of witnesses. Despite Richard's claim that an intruder had fled on foot through a residential neighborhood in broad daylight, no neighbors reported seeing any suspicious individuals. No one had heard sounds of a struggle or break-in. But perhaps most telling were Richard's injuries. While he did have scratches and minor wounds, they appeared to be defensive injuries, the type someone might sustain from a victim fighting back, rather than from being attacked by an intruder. Police dogs brought to the scene also failed to pick up any scent trail of an intruder, despite being able to track other scents throughout the house. This suggested that no unknown person had been in the Dabate home that morning. As the investigation continued, Detective Buckley decided to look more closely at the Dabate's personal life. What he discovered would provide a clear motive for murder and completely transform the case. When investigators began examining Richard's phone records and digital communications, they uncovered evidence of the extensive affair with Sarah Ganser. The text messages between Richard and Sarah revealed not just an ongoing relationship, but discussions about their future together. More shocking was the discovery that Sarah was pregnant with Richard's child. This pregnancy had been ongoing for several months, meaning Richard had been living with the knowledge that his secret would soon be impossible to hide. The text messages showed that Richard had been promising Sarah he would leave his wife. He had painted his marriage as unhappy and told Sarah that he was just waiting for the right time to file for divorce. The messages suggested that Richard felt trapped between his two lives and was growing increasingly desperate to resolve the situation. Financial investigators also discovered the substantial life insurance policy on Connie's life. The $475,000 payout would be more than enough for Richard to start fresh with Sarah and their baby, without the financial burden of divorce proceedings, alimony, and child support. But there was more evidence of premeditation. In the weeks leading up to Connie's death, investigators found that Richard had been conducting suspicious internet searches. His browsing history included research about home security systems, life insurance policies, and even searches about decomposition rates, suggesting he had been planning something sinister for some time. Most revealing was Richard's purchase of the home security system he claimed to be waiting for on the morning of the murder. Installation records showed that no technician was actually scheduled to come to the house that day. Richard had used this fake appointment as his excuse for being late to work, providing himself with the perfect alibi for being home when the alleged break-in occurred. The motive was becoming crystal clear. Richard wanted out of his marriage but didn't want to face the financial consequences of divorce. He had a pregnant girlfriend waiting for him and a substantial insurance payout that would solve all his problems. All he needed was for Connie to be permanently out of the picture. While investigators had uncovered motive and found inconsistencies in Richard's story, they needed concrete evidence to prove their theory. That's when Detective Buckley made a decision that would change everything. He decided to examine the data from Connie's Fitbit. At first, this seemed like a long shot. Fitbit devices were primarily designed to track fitness activities, steps taken, calories burned, heart rate during exercise. Could this consumer fitness device really provide useful evidence in a murder investigation? Detective Buckley contacted Fitbit's legal department to request Connie's activity data for December 23rd. The company cooperated with the investigation, providing detailed logs of Connie's movement and vital signs from that morning. What the data revealed was absolutely devastating to Richard's alibi. According to his timeline, Connie had been shot and killed around 10 a.m. when he encountered the intruder. But the Fitbit data told a completely different story. Connie's device showed that she was moving around the house until 10:05 a.m., a full 5 minutes after Richard claimed she had already been killed. The data indicated she had walked approximately 1,217 feet between 9:18 a.m. and 10:05 a.m., with her heart rate elevated throughout this period. This was impossible if Richard's version of events was true. The Fitbit data suggested that not only was Connie alive well after 10 a.m., but she was actively moving around the house, her heart beating, her body in motion. The device's sensors had also tracked Connie's movement patterns within the house. The data showed that in her final moments, she had moved from the main floor toward the basement area. This suggested she might have been trying to escape from her attacker or hide somewhere in the house. Most damning of all, the heart rate monitor showed Connie's pulse continuing until exactly 10:05 a.m., then stopping abruptly. This provided investigators with a precise time of death that contradicted Richard's story by several crucial minutes. The Fitbit revelation was just the beginning. As investigators dug deeper into the digital evidence, they found that Richard's own technological expertise had actually worked against him, leaving a detailed trail of his activities. Cell phone tower data showed that Richard's phone had never left the immediate area around his home on the morning of December 23rd. Despite his claim that he had gone to work and then returned, the phone data indicated he had remained near the house all morning. GPS tracking from his vehicle confirmed this finding. Richard's car had never left the driveway that morning, contradicting his story about driving to work and then coming back. Computer forensics revealed Richard's suspicious internet searches in the weeks before Connie's death. In addition to researching home security systems and life insurance policies, Richard had also looked up information about Fitbit devices and their tracking capabilities. This last detail was particularly significant. It suggested that Richard was aware his wife wore a fitness tracker and had researched what kind of data these devices collected. Despite this knowledge, he had apparently underestimated how precise and damaging the Fitbit data would be to his fabricated timeline. The digital evidence painted a clear picture. Richard had never left home that morning, there was no work appointment, there was no security system installation, and there was no intruder. Instead, Richard had remained at home and, for reasons that would become clear during the trial, had confronted his wife in a situation that escalated to murder. In April 2017, nearly 16 months after Connie's death, Richard Dabate was arrested and charged with murder, tampering with evidence, and providing false statements to police. He was briefly released on a $1 million bond but would eventually face trial for his wife's murder. The trial began in 2022, 7 years after Connie's death. The prosecution's case was built around 3 key elements: motive, opportunity, and the technological evidence that completely contradicted Richard's alibi. Prosecutors argued that Richard had murdered his wife to hide his affair and collect on her life insurance policy. They presented the jury with the extensive text message exchanges between Richard and Sarah, the evidence of Sarah's pregnancy, and the financial incentive provided by Connie's life insurance. The Fitbit data was the centerpiece of the prosecution's case. Expert witnesses explained how the device worked and testified that the movement and heart rate data conclusively proved Connie was alive and active after the time Richard claimed she had been killed by an intruder. Richard's defense team faced an enormous challenge. They argued that the Fitbit data could be unreliable, suggesting that the device might have continued to register movement after Connie's death due to involuntary muscle contractions. They maintained that their client was telling the truth about the home invasion. However, the weight of evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for several hours before returning with a guilty verdict on all charges. In December 2022, Richard Dabate was sentenced to 65 years in prison without the possibility of parole. Judge Antonio Robena noted that the crime was particularly serious because it involved the ultimate betrayal of trust between spouses and an elaborate attempt to deceive law enforcement. During the sentencing hearing, Connie's family members delivered powerful victim impact statements. Her father, Keith Margada, told the court that the conviction would finally allow the family to get a little bit of closure after more than half a decade of waiting for justice. Connie's sister spoke about how the boys would grow up knowing their father had taken their mother away from them. She described Connie as a devoted mother whose children were the center of her world. Richard continues to maintain his innocence and his attorneys are pursuing appeals. As recently as October 2024, his legal team argued that he didn't receive a fair trial. However, Richard remains behind bars and isn't scheduled for release until 2087. The case has had lasting implications beyond just the Dabate family. Legal experts consider it a landmark case in the use of fitness tracker data as evidence in criminal proceedings. It demonstrated that personal technology devices can serve as objective witnesses to crimes, providing data that can't be intimidated, can't change its story, and can't lie. For law enforcement, the case highlighted the importance of examining all available evidence, including data from devices that might initially seem irrelevant to a crime. Detective Buckley later said that without the Fitbit data, proving the case beyond a reasonable doubt would have been significantly more challenging. But here's what makes this case truly chilling. Richard Dabate was a computer technician. He understood technology better than most people. He knew about digital footprints, about data trails, about how electronic devices work. Yet he completely underestimated one simple fitness tracker worn by the woman he had promised to love and protect. Think about this for a moment. Every day, we carry devices that are silently recording our lives. Our phones track our locations. Our smartwatches monitor our heart rates. Our computers log our searches. We live surrounded by digital witnesses, and most of us never think about what story they might tell if something happened to us. Connie Dabate strapped on her Fitbit that morning thinking about her health goals, her step count, maybe her workout plans for the day. She had no idea that this simple device would become her most powerful advocate, the one witness that couldn't be silenced, threatened, or convinced to change its story. Richard spent months planning what he thought was the perfect crime. He researched security systems to create a fake alibi. He staged a break-in scene. He even injured himself to make his story more believable. But he forgot about those 1,217 steps. He forgot about the heart rate monitor. He forgot that in our modern world, technology never stops watching. The question that haunts this case isn't just how Richard could betray the woman who trusted him most. It's this: in an age where our devices know everything about us, how many other crimes have been solved by technology the perpetrator never considered? And how many more criminals are walking free simply because investigators haven't looked at the right data yet? If this case has taught us anything, It's that the truth has a way of emerging, even from the most unexpected places. Connie's Fitbit ensured that her voice was heard, her story was told, and her killer faced justice. But I want to hear from you. What technology do you carry every day that could potentially serve as a witness? Your smartphone's GPS? Your smartwatch's heart rate monitor? Your car's navigation system? Leave a comment below and let me know what digital evidence you think would be most powerful in solving a crime. And if this story has opened your eyes to how technology is changing criminal investigations, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. We're diving deep into cases where digital evidence cracked seemingly impossible mysteries, where the devices in our pockets became the key to justice, and where criminals learned too late that in the digital age, nothing stays hidden forever. Share this video with someone who needs to understand that technology can be both a shield and a sword, protecting the innocent and exposing the guilty. Because Connie Dabate's story reminds us that sometimes, justice comes from the most unexpected places. The truth will always find a way. Sometimes, it just needs 1,217 steps to get there. Till next time, stay safe.